Hey everybody, it's Thursday, which means it's Hammer and Nail Show. We're up to episode number 23 tonight. I'm Jack Hammer. I'm one of your hosts, and the other one over here to my side is my co-host, Jesse Naylor. How you doing tonight, Jesse?
I'm doing fantastic, Jack. There is football on my television, which is always a good thing, and we get to talk Niners. I love doing this show with you weekly. Very excited. Let's get it rocking.
Yeah, it's cool. We're into the season now, and last week we got to talk about the preview week one when we had Mav on our show with us, and tonight it's just the two of us, but we get to kind of recap week one and get into week two. And before we get into that game against Detroit, there was a lot of bad things that came out of that game in terms of injuries, and so let's just go ahead and we'll just kick it off there. Let's talk a little bit about the injury situation that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I wrote an article, and thank you actually for catching a typo in there. Appreciate you for that. But so I wrote an article right after talking about how the 49ers, they may have won the battle, but they're losing the war. And the war is injuries, quite frankly. I mean, not only last year, but 2019, the 49ers had extremely bad luck when it came to injuries. And this year it's starting off again. So, the biggest thing that came out today was Greenlaw is going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. Am I right on that?
Yeah, well, it depends on who you see that from. It was anywhere from 4 to 8. So I'm going with a minimum, around 8 weeks, up to 8 weeks is what the expectation is.
Okay, so Greenlaw is out. Mostert's out for the year. Jeff Wilson was already out for an extended period. You've got both starting cornerbacks that one is going to be done for the season in Verrett. And, Mosley's going to miss probably this game. It seems as if that's going to be the case. And then Kinlaw's iffy. So really all four areas of your defense, every single level, or 3 of the 4 areas in your defense, each level you're missing players. And that's significant. The team is certainly deep, right? And that was one of the things that we praised is there was a lot of depth on the team outside of the corner position. And we're gonna see, because it's getting put to the test early. It's definitely not what you would want to see, especially if you're on the side of thinking the 49ers were Super Bowl contenders. And I think all of us expected the playoffs bare minimum, but this is not the best way to start the season. That's for sure. But that being said, Philly is a very winnable game. Philly also has a lot of injuries, and we'll talk a little bit more about the actual matchup here shortly. But injuries, it definitely has put a damper on the early part of the season. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a bad situation. They, not even taking into account the guys that, like you said, the Mosleys and Kinlaws who got hurt before week one, but they they come out of the first game of the season. They've lost 3 guys. Kinlaw or Greenlaw was nursing an injury throughout training camp, especially towards the end of training camp to begin with, and then he really must have hurt it pretty good there on his touchdown return. But it's a tough situation for them. The one thing that I will say, and I am concerned about all of them, because these are all pretty good players, right? Especially the Verrett one, you kind of knew was going to happen. You had to have a pretty strong feeling at some point he was going to get hurt this year. Now, you hate to see it, but you kind of expect that he's going to get hurt just with his history. And same thing with Mosley. And the Mosley one is the one that's really, of the two, is maybe the more frustrating, because that happened in practice with getting rolled up on in practice on a getaway day of all things. And so those are tough. And then they've brought in Josh Norman and Drake Kirkpatrick. Neither one of those guys I'd really want to have starting out there. I'd rather, if those guys are on my team, I want them to be backups. And we'll see what happens on Sunday. Here's the one takeaway that I will say is last year, even with all the injuries, after they lost Bosa and Ford, and just go through all that laundry list of players that were lost.
Yeah.
The amount of times that I saw on Twitter people saying that the 49ers still would have been in the playoffs if it had just been for having competent quarterback play. Right? And now they have Jimmy Garoppolo. He's healthy.
They have the competent quarterback play, right? Or they should. So
yeah, that's kind of where I'm going. They have Jimmy Garoppolo, and they traded up for Trey Lance. So I know you're high on Trey Lance. I'm high on him too. Not as much as some other people, but I'm pretty high on him. I think he's going to end up being pretty good. with those two guys, you should have enough to be able to. The NFL is a quarterback-driven league, and your quarterback can get you a long ways. And I think the pass rush, the 49ers have always built their philosophy has been to build pass rush back,
Yeah.
and we're gonna see that play out. We have 17 weeks in this season, and so we're gonna see 16 games of it for the rest, from here on out, and see if their philosophy holds up or not.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing too to consider though is the biggest difference about this team, and it's to me, it's less about the players, right? Obviously, losing big name players always sucks. But that being said, especially on the defensive side this year, they don't have Robert Saleh anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
Robert Saleh started to become a mastermind when it came from game planning from week to week, changing up his game plans, being able to adjust mid game. And that was not what we saw from Robert Saleh early in his career with the 49ers. But as he started to gain confidence and be there for multiple years, he really started to mix things up. And right now, they've got a rookie defensive coordinator that basically everything is on him. He's the trigger man. So whatever he says is what goes. And I think it's a lot to expect a first time defensive coordinator to come in and adjust on the fly anywhere
Mm-hmm.
near what Salah did. And when I say on the fly, I mean in-game adjustments and week to week. So that's really the difference for me. I think that's the big one is yes, the injuries are there. Last year they were able to recover a little bit from those injuries. They still had a pretty solid defense despite all those players being out. But the difference was Robert Saleh was there, and he's not there this year. So I think that those injuries mean more this year, even if the players aren't as big of names as they were last year. I think those injuries might actually be more of a detriment this year than they were last year or would have been last year. So that's kind of my thought on it. Jack, I don't know if we lost you or not.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
All right. Well, I'll wait till Jack gets back, but that's my thought on it. Let's get through some of these comments.
Hey, Jesse, I'm here. Do you
And I
not hear
can't
me?
bring them up on screen, but what's up, Pinor? There's Adrian. He says, I always wondered what happened to the lead singer of Smash Mouth. I would expect nothing less from you, my man. Me and you have some fun Twitter back and forths. It's all love, though, my man. Lee says, yeah, Mostert. Yeah, I mean, obviously losing Mostert. I think the running back position for me, though, is less of a concern. Let's not forget that the 49ers went out and they drafted two good running backs. Hasty's a completely different player than what he was last year. And the offensive line is much better than what it was. So for me, losing Mostert, Lee, is not as big of a concern of mine. It's definitely not ideal. Don't get me wrong, but I think they have the depth in the offensive line to recover from that more than they do Verrett. Let's say Verrett to me is probably the most important player on the defense. He's not the best player, but he was the most important. So losing him week one is devastating.
Can you hear me, Jesse?
I can hear you now. Yes.
All right. I was wondering what was going on with it because everybody else could hear me and I could hear. I was still seeing myself move around on the screen. That's okay. We got it figured out. Woo!
Okay. Yeah. I don't know.
Let's jump in. I mean, where we were going with that. Let's jump into the game because you're talking a little bit about some adjustments and things like that. And I think that would be interesting if we get into the recap of week one in terms of the adjustments on the defensive side. The things that we liked, the things we didn't like. And let's just start off with some of the things we didn't like because you were getting into that, I think, a little bit with the defensive side. So I'll let you just kind of keep going on with, what was it about the defense that concerns you?
Yeah, for me, it was just the adjustments, right? They came out in a wide nine, which I think works great, especially when you have two big defensive tackles, guys that can take on some double teams and move bodies. They had one of them last week, but Kinlaw didn't play. And so what I saw was a defensive coordinator that was going to run his game plan regardless of the personnel, and they got gashed for it early on. The other thing that I'll say is he didn't really adjust too well. Now, luckily, the game got a little bit out of hand, so the run game couldn't be as big of a mix for the Lions. And I think that more so than them figuring out the run game is why they didn't even break 100 yards. It felt like they rushed for 1,000 in the first quarter, but they didn't actually even break 100 yards total, I don't believe. But a lot of that was because the game all of a sudden started to get out of hand and they were playing catch up. But this is not like, me crapping on Solid. This should be expected. Like, this is his first year being a defensive coordinator. So again, I don't expect major adjustments from him. But that was, for me, I really had high hopes for this defense. I thought it would be a cover one and a blitz heavy defense. And unfortunately, with Verrett being out, I don't see that continuing to be the case. So now he has to play more zone, and I'm curious to see how that plays out through the course of the season. So that was probably my biggest disappointment is, having high hopes for the defense, but I think now I've been knocked back down to reality a little bit, and I've got to temper my expectations on that.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit um, more positive on the way that the game played out. There was definitely some frustration with the way that the Lions were able to move the ball. To me, it looked very similar to what happened in that game. Reminded me a lot of the 2019 game against the Rams. The
Yeah.
second game, right, with the play actions into the flat
Yep.
and those kind of things. So it was very similar. Uh, what I saw from a 49ers defense was, other than one possession, though, they gave up a lot of yards in the middle of the field, and then they did a very good job of stopping them
Mm-hmm.
uh, inside the 30s. So there was a lot of yardage made up from 20 to 30, in that area of the field, right? They were able to get a lot of yardage, and then once they got into a scoring position, you saw the 49ers defense be able to clamp down. So that, I mean, it's a worry in that against a good quarterback like maybe an Aaron Rodgers or um, you know Russell
Russell
Wilson.
Wilson, yeah.
Right. Maybe they're going to make those plays once they get down into the inside of the 30 to put touchdowns on the board instead of field goals. Um, because the 49ers, quite frankly, should have been down 3-0 after the first possession, maybe even 6-0 if you factor in the fumble on the if you figure that's going to all transpire exactly the same way, right? They should have been down 6-0 before they scored. Uh, so there's some issues there that are a little concerning. I think those are things they fall on the coordinator because he's the head coach of the defense. But there's a lot of mistakes in terms of the run fits and things like that need to be cleaned up. And so some of that's the execution part there too. So I think it's a little bit of a balance of both. They need to have that linebacker group do better, and the safeties kind of are a part of that, especially if you're going to be playing as much 8-man fronts as they play and as they played this week. So I'm with you though on the concern about the run game. I think that's something that they definitely need to clean up.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not. I guess my concern is less about the run game itself. Obviously, that game it was the concern. My concern, and let me clarify, is more the adjustments or lack thereof. I'm just
Right.
not confident that D'Amico. Maybe it's the pass game one week that's killing him because they're running a specific coverage, and he doesn't know how to adjust on time, and then it's too late. You're in a shootout and you lose the game. So that's that. I guess that's the bigger overarching concern. In this one, it was definitely the run game and the
Mm-hmm.
lack of adjustment there. But later on, it definitely could be the pass game.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm saying, in terms of the adjustments, I'm saying they were struggled in the middle of the field, but
Yeah,
he had the game plan or the adjustments or whatever you want to call it to clamp down when it got tight. And what I mean by
yeah,
getting tight was getting into scoring range. So that's
for
that's the only
sure.
thing that I say there, because if they were able to score, and again, it's Jared Goff, so maybe we're getting a little bit of a break there because of the
It's
quarterback.
Jared Goff, and it's also arguably the worst receiving core in the NFL. I mean, let's just be honest about that. There's just not a lot of threat out there. So it's like, okay, well, even if we start slamming the box with 8 and crowding defenders, I mean, what are we really worried about on the outside? There's just nothing there. But can you do that week to week? You got to find different ways to adjust. So he'll learn. He'll get better. I think he's going to get better week to week. But early on, it definitely could be an issue.
Yeah, and how about as far as the positives? Was the one thing that
Oh
big
God, there
positive that you
was
take away from it?
there was a lot of positive, right? And so obviously Elijah Mitchell, extremely positive. Um, to see Mostert go down and for him to come in and just pick it up as if nothing had happened. The offensive line was positive. Braceless Jimmy, who's mobile and not scared to get hit, was positive. Debo was a positive. I think Bosa looked pretty good. Ford looked even better. There's a lot definitely to be positive about. Uh, Flanagan Foles looked okay. I just think I think there's a lot. Aziz Al Shair looked fantastic. Again, I think there's a lot. Diamador looked good. I mean, I really can go through and pick 10, 12 things that looked really good.
Hmm.
To me, I think there's a lot to be happy about overall, and they can definitely still win some games this year for sure.
Yeah, and I agree with you on a lot of those. I thought the way they came out and ran the ball was a huge plus, and it was, obviously with Mostert, those first two carries he gains 20 yards, and that's kind of almost what you expect, and so that's a bummer there. But then you see Mitchell come out Mitchell looked really good. He looked like he did all throughout training camp as far as falling forward, his ability to make cuts and not lose any kind of momentum. He just looked really good, and I think the offensive
Yeah.
line played a huge role in that. You got to give Mike McGlinchey his credit, because that's a guy who's been ripped on over and over and over again all throughout last season and this offseason, and he had a really good game. I felt out at right tackle. The entire offensive line had a really good game. Their pass blocking, run blocking was spot on. Garoppolo got the ball out of his hands quickly. His number on that was really high.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, I should have said low, because the amount of time that it took for him to get out was extremely quick.
Right.
And part of that goes into the type of stuff they're doing. When they run the ball the way that they did in week one, if they can continue doing that, it's going to make whoever the quarterback is better, especially Garoppolo, because he thrives off of that play action, that stuff over the middle, which all requires the play action game to kind of help open that up. So there was a lot, and like you said, Diamador Lenore, he played okay. He didn't really get targeted that often, but he played pretty well. Aziz Al Shair had a number of really big plays that helped them
Yeah.
out to win this game. And the pass rush, D Ford looked like D Ford from 2018 or whatever I think it was, when he was with the Chiefs and one of the best pass rushers in the league that year. He just dominated almost the whole time he was on the field. So
For sure.
you take him and what Nick Bosa was able to accomplish, and there's a lot of positives here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing that this is how you can tell Mike McGlinchey and the offensive line played well. You didn't hear anything about him. That's always a good thing when you're an offensive lineman. So
Yeah, yeah. You have everybody ask him who did this, who did that, and what
great.
you. Yeah, it's like, well, you didn't hear about them, so you know that they had a good game.
Yeah, so just assume it was good.
Exactly, exactly. And then one of the things that came out of it was the use of Brandon Ayuk. That's what I want to jump onto next. Was
Yeah.
that's been a hot topic this week. Was Ayuk, and splitting his reps with Trent Sherfield.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your thoughts on the Ayuk thing? I have mine. I'll let you have yours say first.
Yeah, for me, this is what I'll say, Jack, is I just see a lot of contradiction coming from Shanahan and what he's saying, right? And I'm gonna tie in the Ayuk thing by also talking a little bit about Lance here. And so one of the things that we were told is that Lance isn't ready to be a starter because he can't play from the pocket, right? Like that's the perception that's being put out there. He needs to learn to play from the pocket. And Shanahan basically said that in a roundabout way. He's like, listen, we think he can play from the pocket. We saw some good things in college, but he's got to improve on that. And so that's the reason that he's not the starter. So if that's the case, why are you letting him throw inside the 10, which is the hardest place to throw from the pocket, right? Why are you letting that happen? And then why, on the other three plays, are you having him be a glorified running back? Like, both of those things to me contradict what you're saying. Then let me parlay that into the Brandon Ayuk situation where, well, he was outplayed, right? During the preseason. Sherfield did his thing, which is true. But a part of that is the reason you let Jimmy continue to be the starter is a lot of because you've seen him during the season. You know what he's capable of. And Lance is a rookie. You don't know what he's capable of. But Ayuk, you've seen it during the regular season. Last year, he was pretty dang good. Sherfield may have had a better quote unquote preseason, but he's never proven it in an actual game. I mean, we're talking about a player that's had 4 or 5 catches going into this year. So, Ayuk has proven it. He should be playing. So then it's like, well, is it the hamstring thing? Because if it is, and you're trying to work him in, I understand that. But then why is he returning punts? And then why is he running deep clear out routes where he can re-aggravate a hamstring and not getting any thing designed for him. Because even when Debo was in the doghouse a little bit last year, they were still designing plays for him. So, again, these are all week one things. And we may have a much clearer picture after this week. So I don't want to go crazy with it. But to me, from what I've seen so far versus what I've heard, are two contradictory things, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I'll touch base on the Lance piece first, just because you know I was glad to see the way they started out utilizing him. That was what we had talked. I think you and I and Mav had talked about during our show on Thursday, where I thought that you'd see him playing is down in that red zone area. So that was cool. Um, the first running play that he ran, that's supposed to be like a little draw. That's not even a draw. It's just really supposed to be a quick counter. And he was just a little slow on that one. That's nitpicking. Wasn't his fault. It's the design of the play. And then the touchdown pass, that was a simple throw though. That's the only thing there. I understand where you're going as far as the pocket quarterback stuff. And that was about as easy of a throw that you can make, provide a quarterback from the pocket. And it's basically exactly what he did at North Dakota State. They created a situation where they were able to run play action out of that formation and flood the left side of the field, which is what we know that he does really well. Hits those floods.
Sure. Yep.
And that route, the way that they ran that little whip route with Sherfield, really made him become your flat receiver instead of a tight end or a fullback coming out of the backfield. It was him. And so it was a really nice play design, nice easy throw for him. I don't like what they did with him the rest of the game, though. I thought that was bad. And they didn't set him up very well. Mike McDaniel said that today in the press conference, and I agree with him. I don't know what they were doing. Especially I think it was they put him out there on 3rd and 20 or something like that at one point, and told him to run the ball. That made no sense. Both of those plays in the middle of the field didn't make sense. The 3rd and 1 didn't make sense, and the 3rd and 20 didn't make sense. Shanahan lost me with those two. As far as the stuff with Ayuk, yeah, I don't quite, I don't know what went into it other than if you're looking at it from a play calling standpoint, I don't think there was a whole lot to it with either one of those guys, because whether it was Ayuk or Sherfield, they were basically doing the same things, right? They were, if you're with Sherfield, he's had a really good season, preseason with Lance. So if you want Lance to throw the ball, you want to have Sherfield in the game.
For sure, yeah. They have chemistry.
Right. So that makes sense with the first catch for Sherfield and why he'd be the target, or he'd be on the field with that because he's going to be one of the primary targets. But beyond that, Sherfield and Ayuk both basically did the same thing all day long, which is run clear out routes for Deebo Samuel and for George Kittle. And I think that's something we're going to see a lot of this year, especially in situations like this where the 49ers are running the ball quite a bit. There's just not going to be enough opportunities to be split amongst everybody. And so somebody's going to be left out. The fact that it was Ayuk in week 1, I think there was definitely some message sending there. The more you've listened to what Shanahan has been saying throughout the week, there was definitely a point trying to be made as far as he needs to pick it up. He needs to get better. And so I think there's that piece. I've heard people trying to compare this with like what Shanahan, with Pettis, but it's really more like people trying to compare what he said about Pettis with what he's saying about Ayuk. And I think these are two totally different situations, because when he said that about Pettis, it was after a game in which Pettis only played 2 or 3 snaps. Ayuk played half of the game, roughly. He only had 1 snap less than Sherfield. So he was out there quite a bit. And I do think that they're trying to send him a message. I understand where you're going as far as the games and things like that with these different guys. And he had a rough preseason. He dropped the balls in the first 2 games. Been dropping the ball a little bit at practice. He looked really good at the beginning of practice. I can't really say he tailed off, but there's definitely something going on there. We know he's a good player, and Sherfield's, I think, overachieving as well. So you put those kind of things together, and you've got a group. You have 2 guys that are battling for one position on a team that's going to be run heavy, and you're not going to have a lot of your best receiver on this team. I'm sorry, I love Brandon Ayuk. I think he has potential to be a number 1, but with all the things that Deebo Samuel does, he's the best receiver on the team if he's healthy. And then you have George Kittle, who's probably your second best. So you've got second, or it's a battle between him and Ayuk. But the I mean the last thing I'll see on this is Ayuk needs to get. He's the guy that needs Trey Lance to play, because he needs somebody that's going to be able to throw the ball down the field to him.
Yeah, for sure. And Debo certainly is. I mean, that was, I don't know if we talked about it here. I swear we did, but maybe not. That was the player that I pegged to really be a breakout star on the offense was Debo, because I just felt like he wanted to shut everybody up. I think he was in phenomenal shape, or thought he was in phenomenal shape. And there's just so many ways to get him the ball. And I thought that this would be the year that Debo would put people on notice. And it hasn't taken long. People are already noticing how good Debo is, which is fantastic. But just getting back to the Lance thing real quick. And one thing that you said was interesting. And I just want to ask you this is, you said that throw was really easy for Lance. And I completely agree with you. And a lot of that is because, they went play action. They, faked the handoff, and all those linebackers sucked all the way up. And then he had an easy whip route. But that really right there is like, that picture is my whole argument as to why Lance should have been the guy the whole time, because I always said that once it got to the regular season and you used Lance like that the game actually could get easier for him in the regular season than it was in preseason, because you're moving him around. You've got the threat of him running. And in the preseason, you either mostly saw him either play from the pocket, or you saw him just doing the read option. You never really saw them paired together and opening up his offense. And the few times that he did roll out on designed rollouts, those were his best throws, Jack. Those were the ones where he didn't throw it too hard, where there wasn't a lot of wobble, where he wasn't second guessing. And there was only about 3 of those throughout the preseason, but those were his best throws. And so, I don't want to beat a dead horse on it, but I just wanted to kind of make that point that, yeah, it did look easy for him. And that's kind of what I expected it to look like once he got to the regular season, is a lot more easy throws, because there is the threat of those things.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's one of the things when you watch Trey Lance, and we've had the discussions. Well, not just us, but people on 49ers Twitter have had these discussions about Lance. It's the wobble, it's the overthrowing the ball, it's all these different things that are causing the problems. And I think the real issue for Trey Lance has been the ability to get the ball out on time. And because what happens with him a lot of times is he's a little bit late on the read, and so because he's late on the read, he overthrows. He's trying to throw it too hard to make up for his lateness, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why you see the play like on Sunday where he's got a guy wide open. It's an easy throw for him, and he sees it quick. He's not having to try to rush it to beat the coverage, and so he lays it in there nice and neat. The biggest difference between the two, and the reason why he's in there, I think, is it goes back to the consistency. And I agree with you that if Lance played more, he's going to become more consistent. It's a tough situation. The 49ers are going to be in this situation. We're going to be having this conversation with these guys all year long, but there's a rhythm with Garoppolo that's not there with Lance. That's the best way that I can put it. You saw it throughout camp. The results were really similar in that, like when they'd be doing move the ball periods, Garoppolo would get a touchdown and Lance would get a touchdown. We've talked about this before, right? How the results were the same of the drives, but the way that they got there wasn't the same. Whereas, Garoppolo was just it was always more of a flow. And then with Lance, it was more stop and start. And, I don't think there's a wrong answer here for the 49ers. And if they can, as long as they continue to develop Lance the way that they are, I think they're going to be okay. One last thing that I'm going to say on Lance, and we'll jump off of this because we'll go to something else. But
for sure,
I don't know if you heard the Steve Young comments on KNBR yesterday. Did you hear those?
I did. Yeah, I did. Yep.
Yeah, and so the comments that I'm talking about was when he starts talking about the quarterback in Baltimore and his need to Lamar Jackson and his need to be able to play from the pocket. Mm-hmm. He has that ability to run around and make plays, but he needs to be able to, in order to take his game to the next level, he needs to play from the pocket. And that goes right back to everything that we saw with Lance during the preseason. And I think really what they're trying to get out of him, Lance isn't anywhere close to Lamar Jackson. Let's just make sure that everybody understands that, because
yeah, for sure.
Well, what I mean by that is he's not the athlete that Lamar Jackson is,
No, no.
right? He's not the stop, start, run around kind of quarterback at all. He's
Yep.
definitely more. He's already more of a pocket passer than Lamar Jackson is. So he's already ahead of him in that phase of the game. But he needs to get more consistent. He needs to see things quicker. His rhythm in the offense needs to improve. There's times when he hits his back foot and he's trying to get the ball out before he's supposed to, and that's why you see him double clutch and then he throws it too hard because he's a little bit ahead of the thing. So give him time. I think we just need to be really patient with this, and when the time's right, he's going to play, and I think he's going to play at some point this year a lot more than what we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, definitely. And regardless of what happens or what my thoughts are, um, it's just not reality. Like what's happening is what's happening, and it'll play out. Like we're gonna see Lance at some point. This season, next season, what have you. I would expect it to be this season. I don't, who knows when at this point, but I guess that I just wanted to make that point is, for everybody that's like, well, how could you have ever wanted Lance and look at how much he needs to work on and da 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 da. It's like, well, yeah, but again, in the regular season, it's a different game, and I get that the defense is tougher, and he hasn't played against a one defense, and he looked, you know, quite frankly, he looked bad at times, right? And so I understand all those things, but the game is completely different when it's designed around you and it plays to your strengths. And I just felt like, I feel like, not just felt like, but I feel like even when he does get in, he's still not going to be perfectly polished from the pocket. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen by
Mm-hmm.
playing sparingly. And when he does play, that it's going to be really fun to watch because it's going to be a completely different offense, So I'm just curious to see how it plays out when he does actually get in.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun to see how what when he does have extended playing time. It's definitely going to be a story to follow.
Yeah,
Uh, let's jump into Philadelphia this week. I think
yeah.
you and I are on a lot of different on a very different wavelength when it comes to how good the Philadelphia Eagles are, just based off of some of the things that I've seen on Twitter. I haven't really heard
Oh,
you and I haven't talked, but
yeah.
just based on your, I think your feelings of their ability versus where I think they are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I want to take everything with a grain of salt because let's be clear, Atlanta might be one of the worst teams in the NFL. But, conversely, obviously the Lions are in that same boat. So,
Mm-hmm.
week one is overreaction week for sure. And a lot of teams that are good lose week one. I mean, it's just historically what happens in the NFL. And a lot of teams that look really good week one, almost unbeatable, aren't that good. It is what it is. But that being said, I just like some of the things that I saw from Philly as far as what they're doing with Jalen Hurts, right? And um, so what I saw was very similar. Like if Jimmy Garoppolo had legs, like if he was very mobile, this is the game plan I would expect, right? Because it was passing over the middle. It was a
Yeah.
lot of dump offs and screens, easy quick reads, right?
Yes.
But you also have the threat of him being able to take off. And so what I saw was a lot of stretching the field horizontally versus vertically, which
Mm-hmm.
is, what the 49ers like to do, quite frankly. So I just saw a lot of similarities there. Now it's done different ways because you have a quarterback that's mobile, right? But you're trying to go and accomplish the same things that the 49ers are doing. You're trying to be a run first, you're trying to stretch the field horizontally. And I watch the 49ers week in and week out, regardless of who's playing. And I know that the 49ers put a lot of pressure on defenses and really a lot of pressure more so on linebackers than anything. Now, luckily, the 49ers have pretty good linebackers, and that's where I think the difference is. The 49ers linebackers are much better than the Eagles linebackers, but they're going to test the outsides of the defense. They're going to make sure that you're sound defensively, you're making the tackles that need
Mm-hmm.
to be made, and they're going to chip away at you. And so, as I watched that game against the Falcons, it was a very close game in the first half. I know the score looked like it was out of hand, but it was 7-6 in the final seconds of the first half. It was a very close game. And what I saw from them is the Falcons were able to move the ball early, but anytime they got in the red zone, it was lockdown time. Like they put the full shackles on that offense and they could not move the ball. So, I just think that this team is better than Detroit. The 49ers are a little bit worse, due to injury than what they were going into week one. And I think that it lines up for a close game. It's a road game. So I think it's going to be a pretty close game. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I look at this game, and you're right. Your point that you said about the offense, the way that Philadelphia ran it, that is very similar to the way that the 49ers ran it last year with Jimmy Garoppolo when he was hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he couldn't, because from the standpoint of all the amount of screens, and that's pretty much what they did. There was pretty much
Yeah.
screens to the left, screen to the right, and every once in a while they really didn't test the defense much with the wide receivers. I think you had the one deep touchdown
Yeah.
to Devontae Smith on a really nice little rub route there, and that's going to be tough regardless unless you're playing a zone coverage on that. So that's going to be tough. But everything else was stuff that when I watched them, especially like in the running game and the way that the Eagles were able to get to the edge in the running game with the quarterback with Hurts and so on and so forth. Those are all things that, based off of what I've seen of the 49ers in training camp, I'm not quite as worried about it as if I hadn't seen that. And the reason I say that is because the 49ers did that stuff a lot with Trey Lance, and they did a very good job of stopping the outside quarterback run, and they did a very good job of stopping that outside run when Lance was handing it off. There was a couple of times where they were able to make good sized runs, but the majority of this stuff was up the middle and things like that. Now, that's going to be something that we do have to worry about, because if Philadelphia changes up and decides that they're going to attack the middle of the 49ers defense, that's going to be a little bit of an issue, right? So I don't know. I just thought what I saw was a Philadelphia team that they were explosive against a bad defense, in that, when you're running, the amount of the 49ers are going to have to be able to run screen, they're going to have to build a run. Their defense has got to be ready to run. That's one of my main points that I've been thinking about, is they need to really be able to rally to the ball this week.
Yeah.
That's If they can rally to the ball on a regular basis, they're going to be fine. I don't see Jalen Hurts as the guy who's going to be able to beat you deep or beat you into the end zone once you get into the 20. Because once you get into the 20, you're not so worried about that deep stuff. You're able to compress your defense. I think he's going to move the ball up and down the field on the 49ers. I would expect that, but I don't think we're going to see touchdowns. I think it's going to be they're going to be limited to a lot of field goals. At least that's my takeaway. And some of that could be completely off now with the issues that we have at cornerback. But that's what I saw out of Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. Plus, the other thing that I saw an Eagles team that shot themselves in the foot repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
They had 12 penalties in the game, 9 on offense. They every time they did something, they killed themselves throughout the game of putting themselves in second, third, even first down. It was always seemed to be long yardage situations, and that played into them, being 3 of 13 or 3 of 14, whatever their number was on third down. So you put that in there. The Niners only had 2 penalties on offensive penalties last week against Detroit. If the 49ers can just play a clean game, they're the better team, and I think they can. I think they can win somewhat handily if they just play up to their potential on offense and are able to play good in the red zone on Sunday on defense.
Yeah, I actually noted that as well, and not only that, but the Falcons shot themselves in the foot too, quite a bit.
They did.
I noticed, and so that bodes well for a defense. Like, it takes the pressure off the defense when you're in 2nd and 20. It's not as big of a deal. So I'm curious to see how it plays out. There's definitely some good players over there. The corners are both good. You've got Nelson and Slay. I respect both of those guys. Up front, I think they're stout. The linebackers is where they're weak, and I really expect that George Kittle has a really big game. Like, if I have to peg a player to not necessarily have a Debo game, but to be the Debo of this week and have a good game, it's got to be Kittle. And not only Kittle in the pass game, right? But Kittle, as far as run blocking, is going to have to be huge, because they're going to have to set that edge and stretch things out. We know what the 49ers like to do. So Kittle's got to be the guy this week. He's got to be the weapon. He's got to take advantage of those safeties and those linebackers, where, again, they're 2 biggest weaknesses on the defense. And, I think Kittle can definitely do it. And I'll say this, Jimmy, hit use check on the wheel route. Like, don't let that happen again, like last year.
Yeah, and that's you just took the words out of my mouth. I think that play action game was there last year because
Yeah,
the linebackers, bite up so easily on the run fakes.
for
I
sure.
think I think based off what we saw in week one that they're still doing that. And if Garoppolo can just hit the throws, I think there's some big plays to be made in the
Yeah,
passing game. They are going to struggle with the pass rush if they let themselves get buried, like especially like what Atlanta did, where they're in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, third and long situations,
for
even
sure.
2nd and 15. They're going to get after you. If you can just keep it clean, I think you're going to be okay. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, the 49ers do a good job for the most part of staying in front of the sticks, and that's going to be huge this week. What's your score prediction on this one?
Well, we're going to get to that one. One last thing I wanted to say about
Okay.
the game, and this is where Game Pass not having the all 22 really bites,
Yeah.
because what I would say is if you have the all 22, if you had that ability, I'd want to go back and I'd want to watch the Seattle game against the 49ers when they played in Seattle. Because if you remember at that
You're
point,
talking about in last year or the year before?
this year from 2020. And the reason I say that, and this might sound crazy, but the reason I say that is because at that point in time, remember, Garoppolo wasn't able to really throw the ball down the field. So everything
Mhm.
was the dink and the dunk and the stuff like where we saw from Jalen Hurts on Sunday. Because Hurts only averaged 3.4 air yards per attempt, lowest in
Yep.
the league.
Yep.
And Jalen Rieger only averaged 1.1 air yards per per target. So
Yeah.
uh, there's a lot of that going on. And I'd like to be able to go back and watch the Seahawks and the way that they played the 49ers and kind of how their coverages looked and those kind of things and what their game plan was, because they knew that the 49ers were going to be run heavy and they knew that they weren't going to be able to beat them deep down the field. And I don't really think the Eagles are going to be able to either, because I don't think Jalen Hurts is really an accurate thrower of the football uh, on a consistent basis. So if I could go back and watch that, and I think there's a way that I can get to it now that I'm complaining
There
about
is.
Game
Yeah.
Pass.
Yeah, there
Uh,
definitely is.
I think that would be my philosophy in this game. I just think you just need to keep everything in front of you. Let them have to work their way down the field and then shut them down in the red zone. That's
Yeah.
really what, and you're going to see a lot of zone. There's going to be a mix of man. Always
Yeah,
you can't always just play the same thing all game long,
for sure.
right?
For sure. And that's again, I think we're actually on the same page here in the fact that the corners are going to be huge, not from a coverage standpoint, but from a tackling standpoint. And it's tackling and holding the edge. So when those screens come out, can they be disciplined and kick those players back to the inside, funnel them back in for Fred Warner and Aziz and Flanagan Foles to make those plays, the
Yes.
Wards and the Tarts? That's where it's going to be key. So, this may not be a coverage test like you're going to see against a Green Bay, but it's definitely going to be a test nonetheless in a completely different way. So I'm curious to see how Lenore, and if Ambry Thomas plays, what have you, how they're able to be disciplined and funnel things back inside this game.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And you asked me about the score prediction, and we
Yeah.
actually I'm going to let you start because Tommy he asked
Hey.
us he donated $2. So Tommy, thanks for the donation. He wanted to see Jesse, what's your score prediction for week 2?
What's up, Tommy? Good to hear from you, my man. Haven't seen you in a bit. Yeah, so for me, I do think it's going to be a close game. I think that the 49ers do win, and I'm going to go with the 49ers to win 23-20. I don't think it's going to be the most high scoring game. I think both teams are going to be able to move the ball. But Jack, you just made the point about stopping Philadelphia once they get to the 20. And I think that Philadelphia can also do that to San Francisco. I think this works both ways. And so we're not going to see a high scoring game from either team. At least I don't expect it. And so, if either team's going to score a lot, it's going to have to be because they broke one. And the 49ers definitely have that ability, don't get me wrong. But so does Philadelphia. I just think both teams defensively are possibly ahead of the offenses when it comes to down in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think that the game's going to be a really good, hard fought game. They're on the road. It's still East Coast time. But yeah, I'm going to go 23-20 Niners.
Okay, and I'm going to go. I have the 49ers winning this one as well. I think I'm going to give the Eagles 16 points. I think they're going to get one touchdown, and then the field goals. I talked a lot about field goals,
Yeah.
so I'm going to say 3 field goals and a touchdown gets you to 16. I think the 49ers are going to be somewhere in the 24 to 27 range. So I'm going to say
Okay.
24-16, 27-16, 49ers win.
Okay.
It's good. There's going to be a back and forth. I think the difference is the 49ers getting the ball into the end zone. I think they're going to have
Yeah.
a few more big plays based off of play action. I think Juszczyk and Kittle. Juszczyk's going to get a little bit more involved in this game, and Kittle is always going to be involved. But you're going to get Juszczyk and a lot of Debo, maybe even a little bit of Brandon Ayuk this week. Maybe he does another.
Yeah.
Maybe he decides he wants to hurdle somebody again this week.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you're right. Maybe this is the week where we get to see Ayuk really break out and he gets to hurdle someone. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, exactly right. And then real quick, you have another comment came in. Oops, wrong one. I was trying to click this one, and a couple other ones came in. Eric said after the Instagram hate Raheem got his wife regarding the 49ers, they're campaigning to donate to Melanomaorg in his honor. Check it out. Check out how to support it on Reddit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a tough deal.
I don't. Yeah. Listen, that's when you start getting personal with players. I think anybody that follows me on Twitter definitely would put me in that Jimmy hater category, which is fine. I think when I'm actually on these shows, I definitely am far from that. But it's not personal. It's never personal. And once you start getting personal with it, you're not a fan. Like, that's way across the line. These people are just that. They're people. Yes, they're athletes. Yes, they're in the limelight. But have some class. That stuff was embarrassing. I'm glad that Raheem and his family are deciding to make something positive out of the whole outcome and turn it into a good thing. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, especially when you start doing it to a family member or something like that. I mean, these guys get paid the money, so they deal with it. And I don't even want to get personal with some of the stuff I totally disagree with a lot of the stuff that people say. If you want to say, hey, buddy, you're not good, okay, that's one thing, but you don't go tell somebody some of the stuff that we saw, and it's disgusting, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I do want to throw this one up here really quick before we head out. Rome Upsetter says this mobile quarterback aspect is going to hurt us since we don't practice against one. Thanks, Kyle. Hey, I put out on Twitter today, I think that the whole deal here was that Kyle Shanahan realized that he needed to get a mobile quarterback, and he went out and spent 3 first-round picks to get himself a really good mobile quarterback for his scout team. That's just another example of Kyle Shanahan going out there and playing 4D chess. And he's so far ahead of the game, he was able to do that. So
no, that's really good. Listen, because you couldn't have done that in the third round or later. So I'm with you, Jack. I think that's great. That's really smart. I agree. It's so smart of him.
Yeah, but and it's funny because that goes back to what I was saying, and I'm not making fun of it anymore here. What I'm saying is, that goes back to what we saw with the first team defense. They faced this so much all off season long. When it comes to the running portion of the quarterback, and I'm talking about as part of a piece of the run game, this defense is going to be ready for that. I'm more worried about them scrambling and than the play, the run, the zone read and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, Shanahan, by the way, talked a little bit about that. He alluded to it. He said, in the past we'd have Mullins or Beathard or whoever would come in and be the scout team quarterback. And then when we were playing an athletic quarterback or a mobile quarterback, we would bring in Richie James when we were going to do read options and those types of things. But the defense obviously knew that Richie James was not going to throw, and they knew that Beathard or Mullins wasn't going to run. So you always had, you would try for them to be disciplined and act as if they didn't know, but they knew what was about to happen. So it was really hard to get them ready. But now with Lance being the scout team quarterback, you're actually able to practice those things, and he can mimic what some of these mobile quarterbacks do, and you don't know if it's going to be run or pass, so they're better suited to handle it, I think.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. And that's pretty much our show for tonight. You have them at, what was the score again? Give me the score.
23-20. Yeah,
23-20. I'm at 24-16. I'm going to go at 24-16. So 24-16.
Listen, I wasn't going to pin you down, Jack. I wasn't going to let you get 2 scores out of there.
Darn. And that would have been, hey. No, but 24-16 for me, 20 to 23-20 for you.
Mhm.
Sounds good. And you have a show coming up tonight. Another one.
No. We kicked it. We're doing it Saturdays, just Saturdays on my channel. So, but you can still subscribe to me. Last Second Sports, check it out over there. We have a bunch of stuff going on. Hit that bell notification so you never miss an episode, and give us some love over there. And then, of course, give Jack all the love, all the attention. Make sure you're following him, hitting the bell notification so you never miss any of his shows. You don't ever miss this show, and give him a like.
Yeah, and I'm going to say uh, the only other thing for myself is I have the show coming up on Sunday morning at 8:30 with Sunil for the 49ers game day preview show that we do. So tune in for that one. And Jesse, please get over to his channel, Last Second Sports, and subscribe and hit that one and mine as well if you like what you see. Make sure you're liking, commenting, and subscribing. Those are the three things that you must do if you like what you're saying. So to
Absolutely.
everybody, thanks for joining us on a Thursday night. Have a great night, and we'll be back at you soon. Take care,
Go
everybody.
Niners.
That's right.